first I want to send a shout out to my friend Min, who does many of the photo enhancements that you've seen on these videos. A lot of these photos are old photos. They're decades old, some of them going back 50 years. Some of them have been taken out of high school annuals and college yearbooks, and it's amazing what he's able to do. And he uses the software Photoshop, but not like anybody else. He tells me that some of these photos can take him 5 hours to enhance. And so anyway, I'm very grateful to him. He's an admirer of Bruce Lee for many years, and he's a good friend. When Bruce first arrived here in 1959 from Hong Kong, he hadn't been here for 18 years, and of course he didn't know anything about the culture or you know, what the college kids wore, the high school kids. Actually, he started in high school at Edison Tech, and it was really important for him to fit in. And ironically, he showed up here with 20 pairs of shoes with Cuban heels and an equal number of suits. And from what I was told, he longed for a sports car to polish his image. And of course, later on in life, that dream came true. He had a Porsche when he lived up in Bel Air for a short time, and then of course in 1973 he has a brand new Mercedes 350 SL. That was quite a car. But when Amy first met him, she thought that he looked nerdy. She said he had these thick black horn-rimmed glasses, and she thought he looked like a gangster. Amy wanted him to look more the part that she preferred, which was more scholarly, so she went to work on that.
Remember he used to wear those glasses? Remember those thick glasses? He used to feel odd about it?
I've seen
Or
him.
self-conscious.
Glover's got him in his book.
Yeah. Oh, he does?
The black rimmed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Remember that? And I guess nowadays they call him a nerd.
He looks like a nerd in Glover's book, if you'd seen the book. Well, you've seen him
Yes,
back then. I've seen those pictures. That's Bruce, my God. And he looked very thin and very
Yes.
clean. He looked like
a nerd, yeah.
Yeah, he did.
He did. And you know, when he...
Yeah, but
What?
you got him to go and buy
I know, well, I couldn't stand it.
car coat,
Yes, I did.
a Harvard bag,
Uh-huh.
and I don't remember
A stadium coat.
It was a stadium coat, yeah.
Yeah, a stadium coat. I wanted him to be a little more preppy. He was so, he looked like a mobster.
It's been said in many biographies that when Bruce was at the University of Washington, that he had absolutely no interest in getting married, that he wanted to first establish himself. He wanted to graduate school and you know, get some roots, establish himself in, you know, whatever his job would be before getting married, having a family, or any of that. Amy said that that was absolutely not true in her case, and as is well known, he proposed marriage to Amy on more than one occasion. And anyway, this is her recollection of how Bruce felt about marriage.
But apparently that was not the case with you. He was proposing, but what was he offering to you? Marry me and what?
Together we would just go into the future, and it worked.
So he didn't mind being poor with
No.
you. He just,
No.
and somehow love will conquer all.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there was no talk about finances or how we would get along, and there you know, I had too much to do in my life.
Mm-hmm.
There was still too much I had to do, and he understood this. I thought he did, but still he kept pressing. I kept saying, you know, no, I really would like to get this over with, etc. And I would talk to him about I have things to do that I would prefer. Not talking about marriage and getting into that kind of the domestics of having to get pregnant or have children or any of those things. I didn't want to. And I said, I can wait till I'm 30. I don't care. I don't even have to have children, I told him at one point. But it was just, Other than that, I liked being around him. He was fun. He left me alone to do whatever I wanted to do and to pursue whatever I wanted to. And didn't try to dominate what I was going to do, which I appreciated. Maybe some of the Asian fellas would say, well, what are you trying to do? Become an intellectual? And I just think, oh, come on. What do you want me to do? Be dumb? But there were a couple of them that made that kind of remark. It threatened them. That I would discuss something more than home economics or children or, I don't know.
If there was one area that stood out for Amy where she had a real problem with Bruce was he had an opinion or an idea of what a woman should be in his life. She referred to it as the lotus blossom. That he kind of wanted the woman to be a housewife and mother, kind of a 50s model that we even had in this country. You know, the woman with the apron and she takes care of the kids, and she's a very subservient woman, and he used to bother her with that. He used to throw that at her, and she's a girl that, as I said in the first video that I did on her in her interviews, she was very adamant that she was a survivor and she was a very independent woman. She had survived the internment camps, and she wasn't going to have any part of that. And she makes that pretty clear here when she reminisced about it.
This seemed to be his temperament, that if you were to say, oh, I can't, Bruce, or oh, I can't manage, he would do this to you even more. Whereas I felt that I had the upper hand with him because I didn't allow any of that, other than if he were to beat me, you know, senseless. But then I would have shot him, you know. Give me a little bit of consciousness, I would have shot him. But I don't know if she would have been that clear. But he was one who believed that women were there to be used. Because he always quoted that thing about the bee going from flower to flower, the petal to petal. He loved that thing from The King and I. Mm-hmm. And so he was a real classic macho pig. He really was. And it used to offend me every time. He knew how to just rile me up by bringing that quote up. Mm-hmm. And I used to think, oh boy. And I used to write him back a poem. Not in 4 meter, the way he used to do with the Chinese poems. But I used to write to him a long, lengthy poem about what I thought about him. And I used to give it to him, and I thought, well, if he could figure it out, good. You know, more power to him. But I figured that he couldn't. Made it a little bit more impossible. No, I wasn't trying to be unclear. I was very clear. But it's kind of like, figure this out, if you can. Mm-hmm. If you have the wherewithal, fine. But he used to ask Lonnie, what does she mean by this? And he says, well, I think metaphorically. Lonnie would go on and explain, right? And he would feel like an absolute fool. and Lonnie, of course, knew what I was doing. But that was just anger on my part. But if you weren't that way with Bruce, he would bully. And I don't think I would have allowed it.
One area where there was some friction between Amy and Bruce from time to time was their view of the world. You know, Amy had come up, as I talked about, and she talked about in the first video. She'd been spent a long time in the internment camps, and she saw a lot of pain and a lot of suffering and a lot of hunger. And then even when she was in college, she had to work her way through college. And there were times when she'll talk about in the third video where she had no food. I mean, she had to go out. There was nothing to eat, and but she had a great compassion for those the downtrodden and those who were having difficulties in life. And Bruce didn't share that, and from time to time that became a problem for them.
I saw movies of Hong Kong, documentaries on Hong Kong, and what I did see was appalling. You know, the boat people, the city looked crowded. It looked uncared for. It's as if, you would see travel movies of like Sweden and Germany, and things look so clean and just clean and cared for. But in Hong Kong, it's like poverty had just taken over. And people didn't have the time nor the energy to clean things. I mean, there were just too many of them. They were so poor. And as Bruce, I don't know if I could stomach it. I don't know if I could handle that. That would just distress me. He said, well, we don't have to be there. You don't have to see that part of it. I mean, it's all around you, right? He says, no. He says, we live on a hill. He says, haven't you seen The World of Susie Wong? And he says, do you remember that scene on the hill and you look down at the city? I said, well, Bruce, that's kind of like, I don't believe it's there because I don't see it. I said, no, I can't live like that. I would tell him that. I said, I can't ignore those people on the boat. I said, they're in poverty, Bruce, and I can't feel comfortable feeling like I have this and this and this, and you tell me about you have servants, etc. I can't deal with that. I would tell him that, and he keeps telling me how wonderful it would be, how beautiful Hong Kong was. I said, really?
We've all read in the various biographies and some of the interviews of people who were close to Bruce, and especially in Hong Kong, that they give the impression that he was a sex maniac, that he was chasing every skirt that passed by, that he had all these affairs, and that he was just constantly on the hunt. Sterling Silliphant recalls a time when Bruce came to him and he had a couple of women lined up, and later on told Silliphant that he really missed out. And we have these various women coming forward making claims of these long affairs and to the moon and back, and some of them get in people's books and so forth. I can assure you from talking to the two women that really knew Bruce very, very well in that regard, that just was not the case. I think Robert Klaus said that if Bruce really did all the things they said he did with women, you'd have to have 5 Bruce Lees. Well, anyway, Amy talked about that.
I think he had to almost feel that she was beyond his reach. That seemed to be part of the attraction, I think, with me, is that I was kind of beyond his reach. I don't know if that sounds fair to him, but I always felt that this was the challenge for him, that he was going to have me beyond anything else. He was going to have me, to possess me, to have me love him. The 60%, 40%, the percentages that Lonnie goes through. But it was true. And it's almost like there is that strong mother fixation thing again. And how much that was involved, I don't know. It's true, but it's exactly what you're saying. He was not a raving sex maniac, and nor did I see him as someone who was sexually driven. And that wasn't our relationship. And I hate to sound like Betty Ping-Tay, or what her name is. But it is true. It was more of a comradeship we were like creatures in many ways. And I understood this, and he understood this. And was he capable of sex? Yes, he was capable of sex. but that wasn't the major fixation in our relationship. It was more than that. It was something else. It was more of what we both physically like to do. As a dancer, for me, when I perform, after I perform, I've had the biggest height of whatever you could have. For performers, and for a dancer, for me, it's almost orgasmic on that stage, if you've really performed. And after that, you want to go home and just eat, go to bed, go to sleep. But to fixate on sex, no. In a way, you've had your sex, your physical outlet. And I understood that in some ways he was like that too. That there was an expenditure that was there. That you can't compare it to anything else. That he did something just so. And there's this high and this rush that you get when you've done this. It's kind of like when you run. And after you run, there's whatever the chemical thing that happens, right, endorphins come away. And that's one of the greatest highs that you could ever have. And with dance, and because you hear the music and you're doing something with your body and you can hear the sounds and it's so gestalt, that what more is there? You feel that. You say, what more is there? And then sometimes just to be with him after I've worked out or after he's worked out, we're both just sitting there. It's just such, it was so pleasant just to be with somebody who could understand this. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Did you find him necessarily a romantic, affectionate person?
Very much so. He's very touchy-feely, yes.
But as far as wanting to throw all the friends out of the house so he could get you in the bedroom,
No.
he was not the idea. You get the idea that he was just a sex maniac. That all he thought about was scoring with the next woman.
No.
I asked Amy when I interviewed her if she recalls the last time that she saw Bruce. And they had a long relationship. I mean, it went on for a number of years. And she recalls it was in Seattle before she left for the New York World's Fair in 1964.
I don't think there was anything formally said. Except he was a little agitated because, I must have been pulling away at the time. Because he kept asking me questions about, well, do you want to do this, do you want to do that, or come on, let's get, really happy about the whole thing. And I remember that, and it started irritating me because he was starting to get a little frenetic. I thought, oh boy. I thought, no, I'm fine. I just have to worry about my job. I'm going for a job interview. But that was about it. And that must have been close to when I was going to graduate.
When I was interviewing Amy, she covered all the facets of their relationship that she had with Bruce, and from the beginning to the end. And some of it was off the record, as I've mentioned before, and I'm not going to get into that. But one of the things that they had, Bruce was adamant that he wanted to marry her, and she was adamant that she didn't want to be the lotus blossom, and she wasn't going to be a subservient wife or any of that. She wasn't interested. And at one point she recalls that Bruce came to her and said, "What can I do to win you over? Tell me what I need to do to win you over." And Amy thought about it for a while, and then she looked at him and said, "Match my grades." That was so important to her, to be scholarly, and to as she talks about in this piece.
What turned me off eventually was the knowledge that he was not as exposed as I was. And that became a real...
When you say exposed, what do you mean?
I had scholarships in music, piano, scholarships in dance, because my mother and father were poor when we came out of camp. And so he didn't have that background. he couldn't sit down and listen to Bach with me and appreciate it, or read a novel, or read anything and go to the lengths that I did, because my I had a double major actually, English and Far Eastern, and I wanted to do a comparative lit eventually in the grad school. And so those were my interests also, and he was just fixated on just the physical part. It's like you function sometimes out of intellect more than you do out of hormone, and sometimes it's helpful, and I think it was helpful in this case. That yes, I was very attracted to him, and I was extremely fond of him. And I don't mean to be condescending when I say fond of him, to use the word fond. But there's that part of him that I was fond of. And you felt the same way. There's that Brucey Woosey, and I would say to him, hey, Brucey Woosey. And sometimes I would just say that just to kid him, but it was just to remind him that I felt that way about him. That he was more than a lover. He was more something closer than that. He's almost like my child, too. My friend, my child, I was his mother. Remember this thing I told you about? He kept saying that you're different. You're mature. You're different than the rest. And it was devastating. And to see his face again. And the thing that charmed me so much about him, and then some of the pictures that George Tam sent to me, and he said, well, which ones would you like to keep? And I would keep the ones that I felt that was more Bruce, was that quirky self. And I kept those pictures. He says, you want those? And I said, yeah, but this is the Bruce I knew. And it was when he would make make an error, and he knew it, and you knew that you knew it, but that's all right. He had a sense of humor about it, and he would almost laugh at himself. And I like that part of him, so I kept those pictures.
There were several people who had noticed and have commented that Bruce, there was a part of Bruce that seemed to invite a conflict. Sterling Silliphant talked about that. I think it was in Robert Klaus's book that said that, I think he said, and I'll paraphrase, he said that there's a lot of trouble in life, and most people do what they can to avoid it, and Bruce seemed to welcome it. I never saw that part of Bruce because the relationship and friendship that I had with him was before fame set in, before he went to Hong Kong and started doing these movies, and so I saw a much mellower side of Bruce. But Amy Sanbo saw that really early on, and she talked about that in our interview.
It's almost like saying that, well, he had asked for it, or you knew that something like that was going to happen in his life, because he would always set up a situation, or treat a situation where somebody was going to retaliate. And he was always one who would set up a situation where people were going to retaliate and react with anger. But I felt that this was going to be his lot in life. This is probably what was going to happen. It was weird. But, of course, to hear that he was dead was a shock. And it was devastating, and it was sad, but it was logical. And one of the things that I had felt way back then came true. And in that way it was sad. And in another way it was, well, logical. And the Japanese have the saying, shogunai. Shogunai. Well, there's nothing you can do about it. Or that's
Fate.
kind of, yeah. Death.